The NCAA's academic rules for student athletes are the subject of a proposed class action civil rights lawsuit.
That's right. That lawsuit has been filed against the organization's regulatory body and claims its policies for deciding which teams get penalized for poor academics discriminates against students at historically Black colleges and universities. CBS News' Skyler Henry has more.
I was the #1 scorer in the MEAC that year. Looking to achieve a lot of personal goals, going into the tournament, which I wasn't afforded the opportunity to achieve because that was taken away from me by the NCAA.
Joyce Manasseh is a former Savannah State University basketball player and team captain. The final year of his college basketball career should have been a time for excitement. Instead, it was overshadowed by a team suspension during the 2016-2017 season that left him ineligible to vie for a championship. Manasseh and his teammates had made the NCAA's annual list of teams banned from the postseason for not meeting academic requirements, a list mostly made up of teams from historically Black colleges and universities, each year since its implementation.
The ban was announced in the spring of my junior year after the season was over. So going into my senior year, we already knew that we were playing for anything.
In December 2020, Manasseh became the first plaintiff in a proposed class action lawsuit, calling for the NCAA to eliminate the use of the current system used for tracking the academic progress of student athletes. The complaint alleges that the NCAA's current system, the Academic Performance Program, or APP for short, discriminates against students at HBCUs. Attorney Jae-Yun Jung says the system is unfair and broken.
HBCUs are 6.5% of D1 schools, 6.5%. But they're 72% of the teams that have been banned from postseason competition. And they're 43 times more likely to receive a postseason ban. And you can't say that it's something else or something else is going on or Black athletes at HBCUs just don't perform as well, because that's not the case.
Since 2003, when it was first rolled out, the APP and its component, the APR, have held institutions accountable for the academic progress of their student athletes through a team-based metric requiring teams to maintain a graduation rate of about 50%. If they don't make the cut, teams can get hit with reduced practice time or wind up banned from postseason play, explains attorney LaRuby May.
They came in as freshmen, like saying, okay, my practice schedule, my regimen in high school was more rigorous than it is in college, thinking that was normal, not really understanding that that was a product of punishment or penalties by the NCAA against their team.
Former Morgan State Athletic Director Edward Scott, who's now Deputy Athletic Director at the University of Virginia, says there are a couple of reasons so many HBCUs end up on the banned list.
One, I think, is a lack of education. And by education, I mean understanding the APR, the full landscape, and best practices. And then two, there's definitely a lack of resources. You put those two things together, and then ultimately you have HBCUs in a place where they're struggling.
When I was at Savannah State, we had an athletic academic advisor that worked with women's basketball, men's basketball, and football as well. That's a lot of students to be working with one advisor.
Savannah State officials declined our request for comment, noting that the university is not a party in the civil lawsuit. The NCAA offers grants and assistance to HBCUs and other cash-strapped schools. Scott says obtaining that support isn't always easy.
The NCAA has lifted the minimum threshold as far as who's considered a limited resource institution. And now by raising that threshold, that has put HBCUs in a position where they have to compete more with traditionally white institutions that may have a few more resources. And so there's only so much money to go around.
Since 2012, the NCAA has awarded $20 million to limited resource schools, with $12 million going to HBCUs, a fraction of the nearly $600 million distributed among Division I schools annually. However, it's not all up to the NCAA.
We were in a very difficult situation. 10 of our 14 teams were facing a postseason ban. we were facing 5 years probation, and we were facing a $60,000 fine. We were able to turn things around at Morgan for a couple reasons. Our president and our board of regents, they were very clear about what they wanted in an athletic director and what their expectations were for the athletic department moving forward. The second piece was a grant from the NCAA. We were awarded that grant on a 3-year basis. The total of the grant was about $884,000. And so it came out to just under $300,000 a year.
A federal judge has denied the NCAA's motion to dismiss Manasseh's claims. In the fall of 2020, before the suit was filed, the NCAA had already announced it would be pausing enforcement of APP penalties for 2 years because of the coronavirus pandemic, saying in a statement, "The committee is using this time with no penalty assessment or public release of data to review the metric with an emphasis on the equity impact of the rate, as well as a commitment to simplicity and philosophical consistency. The temporary suspension was not enough to stop Troyes and his lawyers from bringing their suit."
Just because they put on a pause doesn't mean that they're changing. Right. It just means that they hit the pause button and that when we get through the pandemic, that they're going to hit play again, and it's going to be business as normal for the NCAA.
Not every HBCU has faced what happened at Savannah State. Over the last 2 years, some teams have seen big success on the national stage. In 2021, the Texas Southern and Norfolk State men's basketball teams became the first two HBCUs to compete in the first round of March Madness at the same time. Both teams went on to return to the Big Dance after clinching a spot in this year's tournament, and despite losing in the first round for a second consecutive year, their appearances will still bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars for their respective conferences over the next 6 years, showing why there's so much at stake for HBCU athletic programs.
There has to be an update. And while I don't know what legislation that needs to happen, I know that there's smart enough people out here that can work with the NCAA, that can update these rules and make them take into account HBCUs, and so that everybody can have a fair experience. We have quality athletes that come through these programs.
Manasseh's attorneys say the case is currently in the discovery phase, and while he may be the only plaintiff right now, they do want more parties to join the potential class action lawsuit. The NCAA denies the claims in Manasseh's lawsuit and all allegations of discrimination or wrongdoing. Tanya, Michelle.
Thank you.